This is Walden Bello, activist, scholar, former congressman, former VP candidate, and writer.
How we robbed the World Bank. There was, however, a big lacuna in the area of economic aid. The bilateral economic aid going to Marcos was relatively small, but that going via the World Bank was massive, an average of over $400 million a year in the mid and late 70s. This meant that the U.S. was coursing most of its assistance via the World Bank, which it controlled. World Bank lending and activity in the Philippines, however, was relatively opaque. What were the programs being funded and set up? Were they related to counterinsurgency? What sort of development was being promoted? The only information that we got were sanitized press releases. We were stumped, and we finally decided that we had no choice but to get the information from within the bank itself. At first, we slowly formed a network of informants within the bank. These were acquaintances, liberals with a conscience. These people started to occasionally bring us some documents, but this was a tedious, although necessary, process. One World Bank officer, the late Edgardo Rodriguez, took great risks to smuggle out sensitive documents. Still, the information was not enough, so we thought that it was necessary to resort to more radical means. So my associates and I investigated the patterns of behavior of bank people, and we realized that there were some periods in the year when there was nobody in the bank. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, July 4th, Memorial Day, etc. On those days, and over a period of 3 years, we went to the bank pretending that we were returning from a mission, unshaven, with our ties askew, and that we were just coming off the plane from Africa, India, etc. The security guards always asked for our IDs, and when we pretended to fumble for them, and as we looked so tired, they said, "Okay, just enter." It always worked. As indicated, security was quite lax on those days. Once we were inside, we were like kids let loose in a candy store. We took as many documents as we could, not only on the Philippines, but on countries like Korea as well, and photocopied them using the bank facilities. This happened over a period of 3 years. There was one close call. While I was rifling through documents at the World Bank's office on the Philippines sometime in 1979, I heard the footsteps of someone coming towards the office. They stepped in front of the office, where the door was locked and the lights were out. I prepared to be discovered. My mind flashed to accounts of Gordon Liddy and his pals being discovered by a security guard at the Watergate years earlier. I was hurriedly preparing a story to explain my presence when I heard the footsteps receding from the door. Close call, but to show what bravado we had in those days, I stayed 2 more hours, taking and photocopying several hundred pages, our richest haul to date. It was after a heist on Thanksgiving Day in November 1980 that we decided to call a halt to our expeditions. This was after we obtained the document, Political and Administrative Bases for Economic Policy in the Philippines, which came to be known as the Asher Memorandum after its author William Asher, a World Bank consultant from Johns Hopkins University. The report warned that the Marcos regime was marked by increasing instability, which could result in the lifting of martial law under a parliamentary system in which President Marcos, even if initially situated as prime minister, would have serious difficulty remaining in power or a military government. 24. This was explosive. We released it first to my friend John Kelly's contact, Jerry Landauer of the Wall Street Journal, then to the wider U.S. press and to the underground in the Philippines. The expose of the report led to a great strain in the relations between Marcos and the World Bank, and was the first indication that things were not that good between the United States and the dictatorship. The documents, ultimately coming to some 6,000 pages on practically every bank-supported project and program in the country, provided an unparalleled look at the workings of a close relationship between two non-transparent authoritarian institutions, the World Bank and the Marcos regime. They revealed World Bank President Robert McNamara's decision to make the Philippines a country of concentration, to which the flow of bank assistance would be greater than that to a developing country of a similar size and income level. They showed how the bank successfully convinced Marcos and his technocrats to focus on industrializing for export markets instead of for the Philippines' domestic market on the grounds that the latter was too small, owing to great poverty and inequality. But the documents also revealed contradictions between the bank and Marcos. The bank's technocratic, pro market agenda eventually came into conflict with Marcos's predatory posture. The key issues, as the bank saw it, were 1. Agrarian reform. The bank sought to create a class of smallholders that would serve as a conservative base against radicalization. Marcos resisted this since he did not want to alienate his base of local landed elites. 2. The effective implementation of export-led industrialization. Marcos, in the bank's eyes, neglected this even as he dragged his feet in bringing down tariffs and dismantling quotas. 3. Marcos's cronies. The bank wanted to disempower them since they were cornering and channeling to their monopolies the bulk of the massive credit from foreign banks being given to the regime, money that was enabled in great part by the seal of approval that the World Bank itself gave Marcos. Marcos, needless to say, wanted their preservation, whether due to personal regard or for political protection. The World Bank papers showed how things came to a head in the early 80s, when in the midst of the global recession occasioned by the Third World debt crisis, the bank imposed a technocrat-led cabinet headed by Cesar Virata in an effort to discipline the cronies. Equally important, the Virata cabinet was meant to supervise a new type of loan, one that was meant to bring decisive pro-market reform across all key sectors of the economy. This was termed structural adjustment. The Philippines was one of the 5 guinea pigs, the others being Turkey, Kenya, and Bolivia. And how could the papers not contain a reference to Imelda Marcos? Imelda, one World Bank officer told McNamara, has identified herself with a few showcase projects, which we consider ineffective and which are a bit of a joke among knowledgeable Filipinos. 25. To the embarrassment of both the bank and the Marcos regime, we held press conferences to expose the juicy documents piece by piece, beginning in December 1980, with the explosive Asher Memorandum vividly warning of brewing instability. Then eventually, we came out in 1982 with the book Development Debacle, The World Bank in the Philippines, 26. My co-authors were Elaine Ellenson, David Kinley, Robin Broad, David O'Connor, and Vincent Bielski. I remember writing for 4 frenzied months in the winter of 1981, hardly sleeping and subsisting mainly on coffee, cigarettes and Doritos, and napping at the office on DuPont Circle. That historic circle was marked by very busy traffic, and I recall praying every day that I would not be hit by a car until after I finished writing the book. This was the only time in my post-Christian life that I prayed, not to save me from hell, but to make sure the book was finished, whether I ended up in heaven, hell, or in the ICU. The book was published in the U.S. by the Institute for Food and Development Policy, and its various editions eventually sold some 20,000 copies. Upon publication in the U.S., the book circulated in the underground press in the Philippines, becoming what the principal Philippine publisher, the late Joaquin Poe, told me was most likely the biggest bestseller in the history of Philippine publishing. More important, the book, many told me, played a key role in the political education of the middle class, especially after they became an active political force in the aftermath of the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983. A former member of the Philippine House of Representatives and recipient of the Right Livelihood Award, aka the Alternative Nobel Prize, in 2003, Walden Bello was named in 2023 the most distinguished defender of human rights by Amnesty International Philippines. He was co-founder and is currently co-chair of the board of the Progressive Research and Advocacy Institute Focus on the Global South, which is affiliated with the Chulalongkorn University Social Research Institute. A retired professor of the University of the Philippines, he is currently the International Adjunct Professor of Sociology at the State University of New York at Binghamton, and is the author or co-author of 25 books, among them Paper Dragons, China and the Next Crash, Bloomsbury Z, and Counter-Revolution, The Global Rise of the Far Right, Fernwood.